For 22 years, John Duignan was a committed member of the Church of Scientology. He claims he was directly involved in intimidating and threatening tactics against critics and former members. Eventually, John came to the conclusion that everything he believed in was a lie.
It's a psychotherapy, that's what it is, nothing to do with religion. Okay, vulnerable, you know, hit the points, hit the buttons, knock them down, and X number will bite, and that's what you want. The guys that step outside the bounds are enemies of Scientology, and they can be sued, threatened. These are very carefully orchestrated programs of intimidation.
John Duignan spent most of his adult life as a Scientologist, travelling around the world. But West Cork has played a vital and healing role in his life.
I mean, my God, this is where I spent my summers, you know, between here and Kinsale. This was our playground. This is where we played as kids, if you like. And then when I got back from the cult, this place says, right, I'm going to heal you, I'm going to help rebuild you, you know? I'm going to help, you know, put you back together, you know.
John grew up in 1960s Glasgow with his parents and 5 siblings. His mother, Madeline, came from Douglas in Cork, but moved to Scotland to work as a nurse.
What was Mum and Dad like? What were they like?
Chaotic, very damaged people, both of them extremely damaged people. My dad was what was called schizophrenic back then. He attempted to kill her while I was in utero, using a poison. And my mum tried to deal with it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the healthiest or the most stable upbringing, I guess, in many ways.
And what was she like as a mum?
She was always exhausted and worn down and deeply troubled. There was not very many happy times there. Even at the best of times, there was a real guardedness. That's how I remember her.
In 1973, John's father took his own life. 6 months later, John had an experience that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He watched as his mother died from respiratory failure.
I'd heard noise, I was upstairs, and I look into the kitchen, and she's leant over the table, lying on the table, and her skin is blue-green, you know. And she is just, she's struggling to breathe. You could just see an ambulance came, took her away.
But you were 11, was it, when she died?
Yeah, exactly. I turned 11 in October.
So you didn't get much time with her anyway?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. So those memories are the memories of a desperately needy, completely egocentric child.
John and his 5 siblings were now orphans. They were sent to Ireland and split up between various aunts and uncles. John and his older brother were fostered by their aunt in Carrigaline.
That must have been just...
Oh, yeah.
What an upheaval.
I mean, they were wonderful, they were loving, they were caring, they did everything they could do.
But there was something missing.
Well, of course, of course. I mean, life was shattered. I mean, that whole, the whole youth, the whole childhood was truncated, and violently so. I mean, I could definitely say that's where I went into myself, you know, everything goes in, everything goes down, self-protection mechanism, you know. There was 2 aspects. One was a real anger and a real rage. There was also expressed a lot of depression, and only, to be honest with you, only very recently came to realize I've been depressed all my life, pretty much, you know.
In his teens, John started to search for something to fill the huge emotional void left in his life by the death of his mother.
At a certain point, I mean, I became very Catholic, if you like, and I sort of had a sense that, oh, well, maybe I had a vocation. And I didn't take it very far, but what the Catholic Church seemed to offer was that encapsulated, protected life.
Safe place.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. We're looking for something to fill that missing.
Yeah.
Who's the father figure, you know, the all-embracing.
Over time, John's attachment to Catholicism abated, but he continued to search for a faith that could be his spiritual home. In 1981, when John was 17, he joined an international Christian theatre group on tour.
I was desperately looking for something.
Yeah.
I said, great, here I go, you know.
Just
pat my bags, that's it, I'm out of here.
A ticket out.
Get me out, yeah, absolutely. You try to renew or revive or rebuild or create another you, right? You're running from a you, yeah? And often people do that by travel, you know, but of course you never do, you know what I mean? You comes with you.
Yeah, you can't run from you,
You've got it.
John spent several years travelling and working around North America before he ended up in Germany. There one day he was approached by a Scientologist on the street.
I was what's called body-rooted. What they do is they'd send out their best-looking young girls, and well, in my case, you yes a leading question. They say, "Do you have a good memory?" Oh, of course, it's a confusing question. Do I have a good memory? Do I not? That's all they want. That's all they want.
So that stops you walking.
It stops you walking and gets you focused. Then they say, "Well, come with us and we'll find out."
Okay.
So. Why not? There's a nice buxom, blonde, Schwabish lassie kind of inviting you to something mysterious and curious. Fine, you follow her. And I did, and sat down, and that was it. I never got out. Well, for the next 22 years.
The Church of Scientology was founded by the science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard in 1953. It claims to be a religion that offers a precise path to a complete and certain understanding of one's true spiritual nature. Hubbard taught that human souls or thetans originated in a distant galactic confederation ruled by a being called Xenu. They came to Earth over 75 million years ago to escape extinction and now exist in a degraded mental state. Scientologists teach that humans need to remove traces of former emotional trauma, or engrams, in order to reach their full potential. And that this clear state can be achieved through a type of counselling known as auditing. On his first encounter with the church, John was brought to a Scientology centre in Hamburg for his first experience of auditing.
The testing they did that day, what did they do?
There's 200 questions, and obviously there's a certain pattern to them, and the pattern is then translated to a graphic reading that an all-wise counsellor then will say, your graph says that you're going to jump off a bridge tomorrow, so you'd better buy this Scientology course right now, and it's urgent and you've got to do it now because otherwise disaster will happen. You know, and so depending on your frame of mind, which in my very, you know, and I was admittedly extremely vulnerable at that moment in time.
And is there anything in particular at that time during that process that you, or during that introduction, that you really hooked onto?
They create an atmosphere, right? So it's a thing called love bombing, which is creating the sense of you are the center of interest.
I totally get the attraction, but like, at the same time, the more you think about it, surely the more you kind of go, oh, hold on a second. So,
yeah.
I mean, it had to be more to it than that to suck you in.
When they say there's a part of your mind that we can help you get rid of that is causing you all this pain and anguish, that's alluring. And so I bought my first bit of Scientology auditing.
John quickly became a dedicated Scientologist. He joined the elite maritime-style sea organisation in Los Angeles in October 1985.
Flew over there, landed in LAX, took an old taxi out there, and I looked at this big, weird, it's an old hospital, 1920s hospital, really. It's sort of something you'd see in a Count Dracula film. And I almost turned around and ran out back to the taxi.
Did you?
But then I said, I've only got a one-way ticket, which is what they said. Just buy a one-way ticket. Do not buy a two-way ticket.
The boot camp you were sent on, what kind of boot camp was that? Was this to train you as a troubleshooter?
No, this was what all new SEOG members go through, and it breaks you down. It completely breaks you down. Anything that would have been the way you thought before. That's what it's designed to do, and it's an intense indoctrination on certain Hubbardian principles. It takes a few months normally.
L. Ron Hubbard died shortly afterwards, but John met with the new church leadership and discovered there was little room for doubt.
One of the punishments that they have is a re-education camp that they call the Rehabilitation Project Force. You won't get out of there until they deem that they can let you out.
If you're in there and you want out, or can you? I know it's stupid. Can you get to a phone and say I'm? No.
Well, you can, and people sometimes do get to phones, but if you're on the Rehabilitation Project Force, you're not allowed to talk on the phone unless you've got two people sitting with you on the phone. Letters that you write are actually written by someone else, but you write it in your handwriting.
The Church of Scientology states that the Rehabilitation Project Force is not for punishment, but a voluntary programme intended to benefit the Sea Org members who have, as one church spokesman put it, badly messed up. Sea Org members who do not wish to follow the programme are not falsely imprisoned and may, according to the church statement, simply leave the order and become public Scientologists. However, the church's own flag orders state that individuals in the Rehabilitation Project Force surrender their liberty, are restricted to the base at all times, are not allowed to communicate or have contact with family members during the programme, and can only make phone calls in the presence of security staff. The Church of Scientology has an official disconnection policy, and John gradually lost nearly all contact with his friends and family outside the organisation. John's cousin Patrick remembers meeting him on one of the few occasions he made it back to Ireland.
I remember this yoke.
Yeah, that's it. It's a very chubby,
There was often occasions that I was previously unaware of where he was meant to come home and then didn't and got moved somewhere. So there was all sorts of shenanigans and dodginess and shadiness coming up. And then he'd come back the odd time, and you know, he always had this kind of interesting thing about him because he had an air of mystery about him, because he lived away, because he had this secrecy about him. And so he was intriguing to me when he was around.
Frank, Dan, Clarence, Elaine.
So I would ask him, you know, what's the Scientology lark? But it was very a prominent part of who you were.
That's correct, yeah.
You know, much like much religious zealots.
Yeah.
Like you didn't want to be nailed down to anything.
That's it, yeah.
Even in a conversation.
Really, even?
Yeah, you'd hop topics.
Would I?
Mm-hmm.
How awful.
Like a rubber ball off a bunch of walls.
Yeah. Oh.
Particularly if somebody was trying to zone in on something that was a bit more personal about you. The more they zoned in, the more you'd change topic or
how funny.
Move around and evasive.
Did they insist that you turn your back on your family?
You're supposed to keep good, sure relations. In other words, it's called public relations with your... So family become a public relations target.
I'm just intrigued that you stayed so long.
Right.
In it. I can't... That's the little bit I'm battling with.
Okay, there's moments of extreme doubt, but the controls in the organisation, they're insidious controls. The times I believed, and I was a dedicated Sea Org officer. You know, our job was to clear the planet. Look, it was really tough being a Sea Org member. It was never easy. You knew what you were missing. You know what I mean? You knew that you missed the fact you go down to the pub of an evening and drink a couple of pints with your mate and have a bag or play Monopoly. You knew, and you knew that you were missing having a wife and family in the house, and you know, you knew that. But this was the mission. The mission was to clear the planet. This is more important, you know.
Along with a number of other former members, John Duignan accuses the Church of Scientology of using aggressive and intimidating tactics towards critics and defectors. The Church denies any unlawful activity and has claimed in court that it has a legitimate right to defend itself robustly against what it calls religious persecution. The Church of Scientology has been found guilty of libel in the UK and Canada, of causing intentional emotional distress and of malicious legal action in the US. But it has also won a number of court cases against critics in the US. As a Sea Org member, John claims he himself took part in aggressive harassment of defectors and critics as part of a policy devised by L. Ron Hubbard called Fair Game.
What are your main regrets?
There's a lot of regrets, right? There's a lot of stuff I'm deeply ashamed of now that at that time was normal. I colluded in things that would have been terribly wrong and morally been terribly wrong to collude in.
And these people, what did you call them? Were they victims? Can we call them victims?
In Scientology terms, they were degraded beings. Anybody who takes those kind of steps is a degraded being.
That must have caused stress, distress, breakdowns, did it?
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. When I looked at the amount of people who had mental breakdowns, it was like every day you'd see something happening. I mean, I think part of the system was designed to do that. I saw people who were trying to escape, who were stopped, who were incarcerated, physically incarcerated. And I colluded in that, and I was involved in that sort of thing. And it's to my eternal shame that I was, you know. The man I'm describing was me, but was a fanatic and was a person who bought into the system. I was so deluded, I believed that this was the way to save planet Earth, the greater good, and this is one of the terms that was constantly drummed into us.
The Church of Scientology states that the hostile behaviour of John Duignan and other critics is typical of religious apostates, who often attribute blame and even atrocities to their former religions, in an effort to justify their own change of allegiance. A spokesman for the Church of Scientology also states that the fair game policy was discontinued in the 1960s and was never used to justify unlawful action against former members or critics. However, as recently as 1989, a Californian Court of Appeal ruled that the Church still engaged in a practice of retribution and threatened retribution, often called fair game, against members who left or otherwise threatened the organisation. In 1984, a UK court similarly determined that the fair game policy was still in existence and that deprival of property, injury by any means, trickery, suing, lying or destruction have been pursued throughout and to this day with the fullest possible vigour.
I've never been as scared in the water. Never. I mean, I've been a few times where we've got stuck in the middle of, you know, rip tides and fog and storms coming in and the boat won't move, or, you know, it's never been actually scary to me. But being in the cult, I was genuinely frightened a lot of the time. Genuinely, there was just this... I'd bought into that sense of impending disaster.
The Church of Scientology claims that its members enjoy better mental health and a lower risk of suicide than other people. However, John Duignan claims that the auditing process never brought him peace of mind because it never dealt with the biggest emotional trauma in his life.
I did hundreds and hundreds of hours of Scientology auditing. On only one accidentally did I address the most traumatic moment of my life, the death of my mother and father, and seeing my mother dying there in front of me. So I could not get them to go there. That's not what they're interested in.
If they're trying to fix you, right, what is the thinking behind not being able to address the main issue, which was you seeing your mother die?
It doesn't fall into their business plan. If I sat down in my first Scientology session and I was able to deal with the whole grief of my parents, right, I'd skip out of there, there's your $50, and I'd skip out of there happy as Larry and never go back.
Okay.
The Church of Scientology insists that its auditors would never deliberately avoid something which is traumatic. John Duignan was free to initiate discussion of anything that was troubling him, and this would have received prompt attention. The Church of Scientology has been recognised as a religion in many countries and has charitable status in others. but it has been denied religious status in Denmark, France, Norway and Switzerland, and has been defined as a cult or sect in Belgium, in Germany and also in France, where it was found guilty of corporate fraud. The church also had to pay damages in lawsuits and settlements in a number of other countries. A spokesman insists it is a legitimate religion, but John now believes he was part of a money-making scheme.
When you talk about membership being paid, what kind of money did you see?
Insane amount of money. You buy these levels of membership.
So the more you pay, the higher up you go?
Yeah.
Did you target people with money, or did you target everyone?
Well, we target everyone, but we target people with assets, houses you can mortgage or remortgage or re-remortgage, people that you could cash in endowments. You don't need a pension. You're an eternal being. You're a spirit that's lived billions of years. This lifetime is nothing.
After 10 years as a Scientologist, John gradually started to have misgivings about the way the church was run. Despite his serious doubts, he remained a member of the organisation for a further 10 years. But in 2005, while John was working in the Scientology Centre in Birmingham, England, he met a number of people from other organisations and charities dealing with the city's serious social problems. This had a profound effect on John.
I kept on meeting real people, doing real things, self-sacrificing, brilliant, intelligent, powerful people, selflessly in there, doing fantastic work. And I began to realize that Scientology didn't even touch this stuff.
John claims he had seen how other disillusioned Sea Org members were prevented from leaving the organisation and sent to the Rehabilitation Project Force. So believing his family in Ireland would be placed under surveillance, he made plans to go into hiding in England.
The actual departure, how did you physically leave?
Okay, so the moment I realised this was rubbish, this was wrong, I sent a couple of messages. My uncle is dying. It was actually true, he was dying, and I need to go and see him. And packed everything, and I got myself into industrial centre near Digbeth, and I found a place I could crash out, and I called my brother and I says, I'm out. Then we found that they began texting me, and they found that I had flown the coop.
The Church of Scientology insists that John lived freely in Birmingham, left of his own volition without resistance from the church, and actually caused concern to his colleagues by the sudden and unexplained nature of his departure. Some weeks later, after he left, John says he ensured he was spotted outside the Scientology Centre in Birmingham as a tactic to avoid detection when he did finally return to Cork.
And I walked past the centre, and I walked past a couple of people who could see, you're here in Birmingham. But an hour after I'd walked by, I was on an airplane back to Ireland.
Okay.
And that was how I got out.
And how did your family react?
So they were glad I was out. I mean, they were thrilled I was out.
How were you mentally?
I mean, I was a wreck. I had terrible nightmares for a long time. Within a couple of months, I was standing on a bridge ready to jump.
Did you want to jump, or you just, you did?
Oh yeah, it was that bad, yeah. But a little voice in my head says, call for help, and I did. So I didn't jump.
Who did you call?
Samaritans.
Recurring pattern of lack of confront. What's confront?
Facing up to a problem.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what it is, facing up.
John, you were lacking confront.
John kept many original documents and letters from his time in the Church of Scientology, including assessments of his performance and character.
He was very edgy, very jumpy. Yeah, like somebody who is fresh out of rehab. For John, it looked like somebody who had to meet life without Scientology. And without that, there was a support and a backup, and as his frame through which the lens through which he viewed the world.
Right.
And now all of a sudden he doesn't have that lens, that's gone, so it's suddenly there's no polarisation, it's the sheer glare of life in front of him, and he looked like a rabbit in the headlights.
Good description, yeah.
John received the support he needed to restart his life. He wrote a book about his experiences which was published in Ireland, but threats of legal action from a Scientologist persuaded distributors in the UK to shun the book. It remains available in Ireland. John went back to college and after decades of searching for a spiritual home, became an ardent atheist.
Religions in general, you know, you said you've kind of put a lot of it behind you, for
Yes.
religions and everything. But how do you look at religions now?
Okay, well, look, rather than, you know, I was a bit scared, I have to admit, I was quite scathing for a long time, right? But I've been sort of chilling out a little bit over the few years, you know, and I don't need to be divisive anymore or oppositional. And, you know, I mean, look, you can be a Muslim and you can be bowing toward Mecca and you can be Catholic and you can be doing the Stations of the Cross. Wonderful. You know what I mean? You're not hurting anybody, you're getting something meditative from it. That's totally fine. You know, you look at the world through these lenses, but we're all human beings, we're all humanity, and that's who's doing the looking.
In the end, John had to go on a spiritual journey to resolve the great emotional trauma in his life.
I took a holiday in Tuscany where I just walked Tuscan pilgrim trails for about 10 days and staying in hostels and so on. And that's also part of a project because I'm trying to find, if you like, I'm trying to have that conversation with my mother. I was trying to find her on that pilgrimage.
John spent one night wandering the streets of Siena and had a spiritual experience that reconnected him with her.
I ended up at about 6 in the morning up at the Caves of San Francesco. And I'm sitting there, kind of push the doors, you know, and the monks are doing their morning chant. No one else there, just me and the monks in a big, empty, beautiful church, vaulted ceilings, everything. And I said, oh, I'm going to talk to my mum. And I did.
Well, what did you say?
Well, you know, I said, look, okay, first of all, I'm pissed off at you. I think you made some wrong decisions. I think you could have asserted yourself, but I understand and I forgive you.
There you go. You forgive her.
What was that?
It was huge, John. To say that.
It was.
Massive.
Yeah, and I came back different. I walked out of there different. It certainly moved me forward, I think, in a very profound way.
Do you think she is in another place, or is it like, where is your mom for you?
Right. Well, she's in my head, you know. But that's where she lives. That's the person I'm trying to talk to. I'm not trying to talk to someone floating up in the sky there, you know. And maybe I even will use that visualization of that, and I'm quite happy to. You know, I can't be sent a bill by the Catholic Church for using that imagery.
No.
If you've been affected by any of the issues raised in tonight's programme, you can find helpline information on Airtel page 700.